Have you ever been sitting at your desk, fully focused on something that matters to you, when suddenly your phone screen lights up with an incoming call, and in that instant, before you even see the name, your entire body tenses, your stomach drops slightly, and there's this immediate wave of resistance that moves through you like a physical force? The phone vibrates insistently against the surface, the ringtone cutting through the quiet space you've created, and even though a part of you knows you should answer, another part of you, a louder part, is calculating whether you can let it go to voicemail without consequence. You watch it ring, frozen between obligation and aversion, aware that most people would simply pick up without this internal war, and yet here you are, treating a phone call like an ambush you didn't consent to. And yet inside you, there's something more complex than simple avoidance happening. It's not that you dislike the person calling, in fact, you might genuinely care about them, but the medium itself feels intrusive, demanding, almost violent in its expectation of immediate presence. There's a particular kind of energy drain that comes with phone calls that others don't seem to experience. For them, it's casual, effortless, forgettable, but for you, it requires a level of performance, of sustained attention, of being on in a way that feels disproportionate to the actual content of the conversation. You can text that same person for an hour without fatigue, but a 10-minute phone call leaves you depleted in a way that's difficult to explain to someone who finds calls easy and natural. You wonder if something is wrong with you, if this is antisocial behavior disguised as preference, if you're becoming one of those people who can't handle basic human connection. Friends make offhand comments about how you never answer. Family members express mild hurt that you always call back later. Colleagues might perceive you as aloof or unavailable. The world seems designed around the assumption that phone accessibility equals care, that immediate verbal response equals engagement, and your failure to meet the standard registers as a deficit rather than a difference. But what if this isn't avoidance at all? What if this isn't about lacking social skills, being rude, or slowly becoming a hermit who can't handle real-time human interaction? What if the people who hate phone calls aren't avoiding connection? They're protecting something else entirely, something most people don't even realize is at stake. What you're about to discover is that your relationship with phone calls reveals something profound about how your nervous system processes interaction, how your brain allocates attention, and why the very thing that others find effortless might be, for you, one of the most cognitively and emotionally demanding forms of communication that exists. This isn't about being difficult. It's about being different in a way that has never been properly named. When someone asks why you didn't answer their call and you try to explain, "I just don't really like talking on the phone," the response you get is rarely understanding. There's a moment where their face shifts, a micro-expression of confusion mixed with judgment, as though you've just admitted to something mildly antisocial, slightly suspect. The unspoken message is clear. Normal people answer their phones. Functioning adults handle real-time conversation. If you can't do this simple thing, something must be wrong with you. They think you're lazy, that you're being difficult, that you're too millennial or too Gen Z or too anxious to handle what previous generations managed without complaint. They think you're hiding behind text because verbal communication requires more honesty, more commitment, more effort, and you simply don't want to give it. Some assume you're depressed, that this is a symptom of withdrawal, of pulling away from life. Others think you're avoiding them specifically, that if you really cared, you'd pick up, and your consistent unavailability is evidence of how little the relationship matters to you. The assumptions pile up. Socially anxious, emotionally stunted, technologically dependent, avoidant, immature, incapable of handling adult responsibility. What's rarely considered is that this aversion to phone calls has nothing to do with caring less and everything to do with processing differently. From the outside, it looks like rejection, but from the inside, it's about resource management. What people don't understand is that phone calls demand a specific type of cognitive and emotional labor that, for some nervous systems, costs exponentially more than it does for others. The lack of phone answering isn't coldness, it's preservation. But disinterest isn't rejection, and boundaries around communication methods aren't the same as boundaries around relationships themselves. You're not saying, "I don't want to talk to you." You're saying, "I can't do it this way without significant cost." To understand this, we have to step back to how humans evolved to communicate. For hundreds of thousands of years, all human interaction happened face-to-face, with full access to visual information. Facial expressions, body language, physical proximity, eye contact. Your brain developed to read communication holistically, integrating verbal content with dozens of nonverbal signals that provided context, emotional nuance, and safety information. When someone spoke, you could see if their body language matched their words. You could gauge threat or warmth through micro-expressions. You could use spatial distance to regulate the intensity of the interaction. Communication was embodied, multisensory, and contained within a shared physical space. Neurologically, here's what happens during a phone call. Your brain receives only auditory information, isolated, disembodied voice data, and has to construct an entire interaction context from that single channel. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for attention and social processing, works overtime to compensate for missing information. You're unconsciously trying to read tone with the precision normally reserved for facial expressions, listening for pauses that might indicate emotion, interpreting silence that could mean anything. Meanwhile, your amygdala, the brain's threat detection system, stays slightly more activated because it can't fully assess safety. There's no body language to confirm that everything is okay, no visual feedback loop to regulate the interaction. For many people, this compensatory processing happens so smoothly they don't notice the effort. But for you, it's exhausting. Studies have observed that some individuals have nervous systems with lower thresholds for stimulation, meaning they process sensory and social information more deeply and more thoroughly than others. Psychologists call this sensory processing sensitivity, and it's not a disorder, it's a temperament trait that exists on a spectrum. For highly sensitive processors, phone calls create what researchers describe as cognitive load, the amount of mental effort required to maintain the interaction. While someone with a higher stimulation threshold can handle the ambiguity of voice-only communication easily, treating it as low-effort background processing, someone with a lower threshold experiences that same call as high-effort, foreground-demanding work. The brain doesn't distinguish between types of work when calculating energy expenditure. Cognitive labor is labor, whether it's solving math problems or navigating a phone conversation with incomplete social data. And some brains simply require more energy to do the latter. Long before most people learn to answer phones confidently, some children learn that unexpected demands on their attention feel unsafe. If you grew up in an environment where emotional unpredictability was normal, where a parent's mood could shift without warning, where conversations could escalate into conflict with little notice, where you had to stay vigilant about the emotional temperature of the room, your nervous system learned to value control and predictability as survival tools. You became someone who needs to prepare for interactions, who requires a buffer between solitude and social engagement, who experiences surprise communication as a kind of ambush. This wasn't a choice. It was adaptation. Children in unpredictable environments develop what psychologists call high-context processing. They learn to read every signal, anticipate every shift, manage every variable to stay safe. That hypervigilance doesn't disappear in adulthood. It just gets refined into preferences that look like personality but are actually nervous system strategies. When you grow up in an environment where emotional regulation was scarce, either because caregivers were overwhelmed, inconsistent, or emotionally unavailable, you learn to regulate yourself in isolation. You discover that your baseline state, the place where you feel most balanced and least drained, is when you're alone or in low-demand contexts. High-demand contexts, where you have to perform, respond quickly, manage someone else's emotional state while managing your own, push your nervous system into what's called sympathetic activation, the fight-or-flight response. For most people, a phone call doesn't trigger this. It's neutral, easy, forgettable. But if your nervous system learned early that unexpected demands equal potential danger, then every phone call carries a faint echo of that activation. It's not conscious fear. It's a body-level response, a whisper of threat detected that makes the entire interaction feel more costly than it objectively is. This is why you can text for hours, but a 10-minute call exhausts you. Texting allows for asynchronous communication. You control the pace, you can pause to regulate yourself between responses, you have time to choose your words rather than generating them in real time under social pressure. Phone calls eliminate all of that. They demand simultaneous processing. Listening, interpreting tone, generating appropriate responses, monitoring conversational flow, managing silence, tracking time, and performing emotional labor, all at once with no pause button. If your brain is wired for depth over speed, for precision over spontaneity, for internal reflection over external performance, then phone calls ask you to operate against your cognitive grain. It's not that you can't do it, you clearly can, but the effort required is disproportionate, like being left-handed in a right-handed world. Everything is slightly harder, slightly more awkward, and by the end, you're more tired than everyone around you. These patterns follow you into adult relationships, where people interpret your phone aversion as emotional distance or lack of care. Partners feel hurt that you won't call to say goodnight. Friends assume your texting preference means they're not important. Family members take it personally when you screen calls. The irony is that you often care deeply, you just express it differently. You might write long, thoughtful texts. You might prefer in-person conversations where you can actually see the other person and feel grounded in shared space. You might show care through action rather than constant verbal check-ins. But because our culture equates immediacy with intimacy, equates phone accessibility with love, your difference registers as deficiency. And over time, you might start to believe them. You might internalize the message that something is wrong with you, that your nervous system's honest limits are actually character flaws. This is where shame begins. Beneath the rational explanations and the polite excuses, there's a layer most people never admit to carrying. Shame. The quiet, gnawing sense that you're failing at something basic, that everyone else navigates phone calls effortlessly while you're stuck treating them like complex negotiations that require emotional preparation and recovery time. You see how easily others answer, how naturally they transition from work to call to work again without visible depletion, and you wonder what's wrong with you that this simple thing, this universally accepted form of communication, feels like climbing a mountain every single time. In a culture that treats constant availability as a virtue, that positions responsiveness as a measure of professionalism and care, your need for boundaries around real-time communication gets framed as inadequacy. You're labeled difficult, high maintenance, avoidant, antisocial. The message, delivered in 1,000 subtle ways, is that functional adults answer their phones, and your failure to do so consistently marks you as somehow less capable, less mature, less willing to participate in normal human society. The shame isn't about the phone itself, it's about what the phone represents. Your inability to meet a standard that seems effortless for everyone else, your failure to perform connection in the way you're told connection should be performed. But shame thrives on misattribution, on believing that your struggle with something means you're broken rather than that the thing itself might not suit your particular operating system. Here's what's actually true. Hating phone calls isn't a sign of dysfunction. It's a sign that your nervous system processes communication with depth, nuance, and sensitivity that requires specific conditions to function optimally. This isn't weakness. It's specificity. Not broken. Adapted. Not deficient. Different. Some people have nervous systems built for rapid-fire, multi-channel, high-stimulation interaction. They thrive in unpredictable, fast-paced social exchanges, and phone calls fit naturally into that processing style. Your nervous system is built for something else entirely. For depth, for context, for processing with time and space, for communication that allows you to stay regulated while connecting. Neither system is superior. They're just optimized for different conditions. You're not failing to communicate normally. You're communicating in a way that honors the actual structure of your nervous system rather than pretending it's something it's not. For many people, phone calls serve as connective tissue between in-person interactions, casual check-ins that maintain relationship warmth without requiring significant effort or planning. They can call while driving, while cooking dinner, while doing laundry, treating phone conversations as pleasant background activity that fills empty space. The ease is real. The enjoyment is genuine. For them, the phone is a tool of effortless connection. But hating phone calls isn't about rejecting connection. It's about knowing yourself well enough to recognize which forms of connection actually nourish you and which ones deplete you while pretending to connect. Your aversion to phone calls isn't absence of social desire. It's presence directed differently. You haven't opted out of communication. You've concentrated your relational energy into forms that allow you to show up more fully. For in-person conversation where you can read the whole person, not just their voice. The long text exchange where you have time to think, to be precise, to say what you actually mean. The email that lets you craft your thoughts without the pressure of real-time performance. You're not avoiding depth. You're protecting your capacity to offer it in ways that feel authentic rather than draining. Neither path is superior. What matters isn't the medium. It's whether the connection feels real, whether you feel seen, whether the exchange leaves both people more nourished than depleted. Some relationships thrive on frequent, casual phone contact. Others thrive on less frequent but more intentional in-person time or asynchronous written exchange. Your preference for the latter doesn't make you less connected. It makes you selectively connected in ways that align with how you're actually built to engage. The space isn't empty. It's occupied by intentionality, by depth, by the kind of presence that requires you to be regulated enough to actually show up rather than performing connection while internally dissociated. When you step back and look at the whole picture, the evolutionary context, the neuroscience, the childhood adaptation, the nervous system differences, a clearer story emerges. You don't hate phone calls because you're antisocial, avoidant, or incapable of handling real communication. You hate phone calls because your brain and nervous system are oriented toward depth, context, and regulation, and phone calls, by their very nature, strip away the conditions that allow you to operate at your best. This isn't a flaw in you. It's a mismatch between your processing style and a communication medium that our culture has arbitrarily decided is the baseline for normalcy. People who hate phone calls aren't emotionally stunted or hiding from intimacy. They're individuals who understand, consciously or not, that their capacity for genuine connection depends on specific conditions, on having time to process, on having access to full context communication, on being able to regulate their nervous system before, during, and after social interaction. They're people who refuse to sacrifice their internal stability for the performance of availability, who choose authenticity over convenience, who know that saying yes to every phone call would mean saying no to the energy required for everything else that actually matters. This is self-knowledge. This is boundaries. This is honoring the truth of your own system rather than pretending to be built differently than you are. And here's what else is true. If you've spent years believing this was a problem to fix, something to overcome, a sign of your inadequacy, you've been asking the wrong question. The question isn't, how do I force myself to be okay with phone calls? The question is, how do I build a life that honors my actual needs while still maintaining the relationships that matter? Sometimes that means explaining your preference clearly and without apology. Sometimes it means offering alternatives. I'm terrible on the phone, but I'd love to meet for coffee, or can we text about this instead? Sometimes it means letting people misunderstand you, knowing that the people who really matter will adapt. You get to choose, and choosing not to answer the phone isn't the same as choosing not to connect. It's choosing to connect in ways that allow you to actually be present. If this video put words to something you felt but never quite articulated, you're not alone. There are millions of people navigating the same internal experience, carrying the same quiet shame, wondering if they're the only ones who feel ambushed every time their phone rings. You're not, and your difference isn't a deficit. I'd love to hear your experience. Drop a comment and share. What's the most frustrating thing people assume about you because you don't answer your phone? What would you want them to understand that they never seem to get? And if you want more conversations like this about the quiet patterns of the human mind, the things we don't usually name, the ways we've been told we're broken when we're actually just different, consider subscribing to the channel. We explore these spaces together, because understanding yourself isn't self-indulgence. It's the beginning of building a life that actually fits who you are.